And welcome back to The Takeout. New polling shows Democrats in a strong position heading into the midterms. Emerson College found on a generic ballot, Democrats held an 11-point lead over Republicans, 53% to 42%. This time last year, they were about even. So let's bring in our political panel, Republican strategist Mark Bednar and Democratic strategist Elleithee. Guys, thanks for being here. Okay, so the generic ballot is something we see every time. But I'm curious kind of how you each assess how much we should be looking into this. There's a pretty big lead for Democrats. How should they be taking that? Is that real?
Probably not. I believe Democrats are leading and that they are favored to take back the House and have a good shot at the Senate. 11 seems like a bit of an outlier, right? Like I think most polls show it somewhere in the 4 to 7 point range, and that's comfortable territory for Democrats. But the other thing I always remind my colleagues in the business is generic ballots don't matter once the closer you get to an election, because you got to attach candidate names to them.
Right.
And so far, we have done a fairly good job of nominating candidates in competitive seats, in competitive districts, who can draw a strong contrast with their Republican opponents. But no one should mistake any lead for comfort. There is a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I tend to agree with you that seeing an 11-point difference, I mean, these districts, too, are just drawn in a way now that it's difficult to see kind of huge swings like that. But, Mark, I'm curious how you see how Republicans might be faring right now. I mean, it may not be an 11-point spread, but should they be concerned?
Well, we've seen a lot of recent polls where it's been lowered to as low as 3. And even in this past month, the generic ballot has actually shrunk about 3 points from the mid-7s to the mid-4s, as Mo alluded to. At this point in 2018, it actually increased for Democrats from 3.5-ish to more than 7. So it's a completely different scenario from 2018. The one thing that concerns me less than a generic ballot in particular, or in a race-to-race kind of knife fight sort of sense, is voter enthusiasm. And so if there's a continued voter enthusiasm gap where Democrats are ahead, that's something that Republicans need to spend the next couple of months making up. And you can, having recesses where you get out there and talk to voters, having a money advantage makes a big deal. Between the super PACs, between the RNC versus DNC, and of course MAGA Inc., we have close to $750 million cash advantage. And so that's where resources can come into play. You can introduce yourself to voters. But the generic ballot aside, this is going to come down to the wire no matter what.
But also talking about the issues that voters care about. And the president hasn't made it easy for a lot of the Republican candidates out there by going off into other directions, by talking about, the 2020 election rather than talking about affordability, by waging an unpopular war. These are the types of things that have an impact on voter enthusiasm on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, you've spent a lot of time on the Hill. You know that the, Republicans obviously want the war to wrap up, but it's so complicated and difficult is what we hear from them as well. But how concerned, the idea that this could be ramping up again, how concerned are Republicans, given that this could potentially be going on in the fall, which they didn't expect?
Well, it's important, no matter what happens militarily, that it does not happen in a vacuum. Every step of the way, what I would really love to see more is President Trump, Vice President Vance, Pete Hegseth out there kind of making the case. Say militarily, what are Iran's capabilities? What is their threat to the United States? What are our capabilities? Why is it important that we take particular military action? Why is it important that we ramp up? Why is it important for the Congress to kind of restock our munitions with all the money that's being requested? So having that argument run parallel to the actual actions taken, I would really love to see more of that. And I think if we do, then Republicans who are running for office have something better, more tangible to point to, other than saying, we're all learning this for the first time on the nightly news.
Is it possible now in such a nationalized environment to separate yourself from the leadership, essentially? I mean, to the point about candidates in these certain races, can you still run as a candidate, your name and not your party?
I mean, right now we have, this is the case in both parties, right? You can nationalize a race based off of what one person did. So the fact that Senate Democrats wholeheartedly have to deal with the Graham Plattner scandal, even if they had never met the guy. And of course, Republicans, we face that same issue with candidates from cycle to cycle as well. Where this really comes into play is when, we see this in Michigan for the Senate race or in Wisconsin, the governor race. And normally it's with Republicans who are on the other side of this, where if you're running and the other party is facing a nasty primary, you can kind of run in your own lane and talk about your state issues when the other party is fighting in a primary. So that's kind of the only place where you can escape that.
I mean, this seems, Mo, like a year that Democrats want the national environment to be what people are voting on.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's one question that's on the minds of a lot of Democratic candidates that they're trying to, the one contrast that they're trying to make. Do you support this president, or do you want to stand up to this president? And they've got a whole list of issues. Affordability first and foremost, the war. We could go down the list. But that's the contrast, right? The president said and Republicans said that they were going to make your lives easier, and they haven't. That's going to be the question that they keep posing on the trail.
All right. Well, we will cover this for the next several months. Who knows what happens in November? Mark and Mo, thank you very much for your time.